Secondly, is there an update on the potential rail strike? Is the president talking to any of the parties?
So just a couple of things on that that I want to say just at the top, because I think it's important. I know I spoke to this on the plane yesterday. As the president has said, from the beginning, a shutdown is unacceptable because of the harm it would inflict on jobs, families, farms, businesses, and communities just across the country. And a majority of unions have voted, as you all know, I know you guys are following this very closely, to ratify the tentative agreement that we saw back in September. And the best option still is for the parties to resolve their differences themselves, and that's what the president's going to continue to call on. To your specific question, though, Steve, the president is indeed involved directly, but I don't want to get into details at this time, but he has been involved. He remains focused, again, on protecting America's families. We have to avoid a rail shutdown. It will harm, again, families, businesses, and farms. And so we're going to continue to speak to this. The administration is in touch. Again, to your question, with parties involved, as we have been since before the tentative agreement was reached.
Thank you. Great. To that question, the White House does seem a lot more hands-off this time around, though, than you were before the last strike deadline. Smart Transportation Division President Jeremy Ferguson this morning said that there's been, quote, no real engagement yet at this point from the administration. Can you explain what's different this time around? You keep pointing to the fact that it's the best option is for the parties to resolve this themselves. Is that because you don't want Congress to get involved, or is that because you'd like these unions to resolve this amongst themselves without involvement from the administration?
We have said, look, there's a tentative agreement, as you all know about, and we have said I just said the president has been directly involved. He's been in touch, the administration more broadly has been in touch with respective parties. Secretary Walsh, as I mentioned yesterday, has been in touch. We have been involved since before the tentative agreement. The president laid out, as you all know, a path forward. But this is something that he believes that the parties should resolve themselves. They should come to the table in good faith and get this done. Get this done on behalf of the American people.
Can you explain how the president's been involved, though, just given that one of the union presidents is saying he hasn't seen any real engagement?
I mean, you're
so
talking
far,
about...
you've only told us that he's been briefed, but you haven't given us
No, I
anything
just
else.
said he's been direct. I said this is the third time I'm saying he's been directly involved. You're talking about one union president. There are 12. So you're talking...
Making calls to other
You're
unions,
talking
or-
about one. I said I'm not going to provide any details at this time. The administration, more broadly, has been also in touch with parties. Yes, the president has been clearly. He's been he's been briefed, but he has actually been directly involved. Not going to get into more details on that, but you're talking about one president out of 12, and I know that they voted yesterday. This particular union that you're speaking of, but again, we are calling on all parties to come together and resolve this.
On the directly involved, he was directly involved ahead of the September agreement being reached. Are you saying he's been directly involved this week?
So I could say this, he's been directly involved since before there was even a tentative agreement, right? So that has not stopped. The president has been kept abreast as to what is happening, and he has been directly involved because he understands how important it is to make sure that we do not have a rail shutdown, because as I laid out, it would have a really serious effect on American families.
Who this week, in the closing days before notices may have to go out, in the administration is in touch with the unions? Is it the labor secretary? Is it somebody else in this building?
Well, I've been very clear that the Secretary Walsh has been in touch with the respective parties in this, and he has continued to stay in touch with again the parties that are involved in this agreement. But again, I'm not gonna get too far ahead of that. Look, he's encouraging, Secretary Walsh specifically, he's encouraging sides to reach a resolution that prevents a threat to a shutdown, and that's been our focus. Clearly, there's other folks in the administration, but Secretary Walsh played such a pivotal role in the tentative agreement, and so he's easy to point to because he's a Secretary of Labor and has been certainly directly involved.
Is there a date in the next week or so at which point you'll have to elevate this if there isn't an agreement? Because again, there's going to be disruption
Oh,
for
we know.
industries that rely on the
We
roads.
understand. We understand that there will be disruption. We have been very clear about that. Again, the president has been directly involved. I will, don't have any details to provide at this time. Secretary Walsh has been involved as well, as you know, as the Secretary of Labor, and the administration more broadly as well has been in touch with the parties involved in this really critical, important issue. Okay.
I think just to drill down on this part of it, not to belabor the point, but there was almost a celebration in the Rose Garden 2 months ago with the president, with these labor leaders, with management. Is the president surprised to see that so many of these, obviously not all of them, but 4 out of the 12 of these unions have actually rejected a deal which he tried to sell as a strong deal for labor for these workers
So
involved?
I want to be very clear here. The tentative agreement that we saw in September actually helped to prevent an immediate disruption to the economy. So that was important, that we were able to prevent that. This administration, it worked to bring unions and rail companies together to reach that agreement, and it kept our rail system working and prevented a disruption, again, to our economy. So that was an important moment as well. Look, we're going to be steadfast in saying that all parties need to come together. They need to come together in a good faith, and we have to prevent a rail shutdown.
And then two other questions if we can.
Okay, Stephen.
Thanks. Just once more on the rail labor dispute. The President a couple months ago called the tentative agreement a big win, and it wasn't just the fact that a strike at the time was averted. He was talking about the substance of the agreement. So now that the rank and file, the workers in 4 of the unions have rejected that agreement, is the President pulling back on his endorsement, or does he still think that this tentative agreement should be implemented?
Well, here's what we're saying is that it averted a horrible downturn in our economy by that tentative agreement. It was a big deal. What it could have done to our economy would have been devastating. And so right now we are asking the parties involved to come together in good faith and resolve this. The president is directly involved, as I have said. Secretary Walsh has been involved, as I've said, and not just now, but before the tentative agreement. And so, look, it was an important. The tentative agreement was indeed important, again, because it stopped a horrible potential downturn again to our economy.
Part of the White House's messaging, part of the industry's messaging, is the majority of the unions involved have actually ratified the contract. Yep. So I guess the question is, if you're urging both sides to come to the table, the companies don't have a particular incentive to do so. Are you suggesting that the president would not sign a bill that would impose the terms of the tentative agreement on those 4 unions?
Look, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals from here. What I'm saying is we've been very clear that both sides need to come together to reach a resolution that prevents a threat to a shutdown, and that's what we're going to continue to be very clear about.
Thanks, Karina.
I keep forgetting. I'm so sorry.
I've got 2 questions. You
Yeah.
said a couple of times that the president's going to wait to have conversations with Republicans and Democrats in Congress before laying out the agenda. The president said that he was planning to have members of Congress from both parties, the leadership, coming over to the White House. Is there any update on the plan for that meeting, when it's going to take place? Have invitations been sent out? Has the president started to have those preliminary conversations with leaders?
Don't have anything to preview at this time on members coming to the White House. When we do, we'll certainly share that with all of you. Okay.
To follow up on Stephen's question, is there a point at which the White House would welcome congressional intervention on the rail labor dispute? And I guess related to that, what are the concerns that the president has to Congress intervening on this at some point?
So look, we are in continuous contact with Congress on this issue, as we have been for months, and don't have anything more to share or preview at this time. But again, we're going to continue to have those conversations with Congress, and once we will convey the view, we will convey that view after we have those conversations with Congress.
So it sounds like there aren't sort of specific concerns about congressional intervention if it reaches that point.
I'm just not going to get ahead of any process here. That's a bit of a hypothetical. I'm just saying that we have been in conversation with Congress. We have been for the past several months, and will continue to do so.